Yeah, cool, man.
Hello there.
So yes, this is the first ever edition of Hope House and Lighthound. I am Lighthouse.
And I am Hound.
Very nice for you to join us here this evening. Before we
Thank you
start
very
off,
much.
we're just gonna both of us is gonna kind of lay out what this is about and why we're doing this and kind of what we hope to achieve. So if I throw it over to my colleague Hound.
Hello there. Well, it's really an intuitive idea because lately it's quite been hard to for us all to connect to our other beings, to our mates, to our friends, and also to ourselves. So it's actually really nice to have just an open conversation about things that are going on within ourselves that are not following any narrative that is put into us but more likely comes from within. So
Nice.
this whole thing is about hope. It's really crazy times right now, but yeah, it should be leading to something really good.
I think so. I think so. And as you mentioned, like the media, the narratives that are being given to us are so centralized, centrally controlled. There's like 4 media outlets that control like 90% of the media. So I think it would be nice, for however big or small this becomes, just to have some sort of alternative narrative that does exist. And I think a lot of people out there are questioning sort of mainstream narratives and things, and perhaps they just don't have as many places to turn to. YouTube censors people, and it's, as you said, it's crazy times, and I think it's the responsibility of all people to try and keep that flame of truth alive.
Definitely. And yeah, and obviously there's a lot to question. The narrative has been quite weird all along, but now it's getting more and more obvious, and it doesn't it doesn't concern. Of course, it's always about the here and now, and the here and now has been crazy quite a while, but yet you realize this is a whole story. This is a tipping point, but it's an exciting tipping point as well, because you really see that something as crazy as this never happened before, and it also shows how much potential there is to go either ways, to lead into some enslavement of the mind, some I don't know, turning into machines or enslaves, or mankind actually awakening their true potential and leading this whole level of being into heaven on earth.
100%. I think you've really encapsulated it there. We are at a crossroads, and it's interesting. I don't know. Have you seen Stephen King, The Stand, the film, or read the book?
No.
No, it's a Stephen King story, and they did an old 80s version. They've just done a remake, and it's basically a man-made virus escapes from a pathogen lab, and wipes out the lion's share of humanity. And there's two groups. Well, there's a few people left, and then the devil is trying to claim some people, and God, through this old woman called Mother Abigail, is trying to claim the others. And it's a really nice critique on sort of human nature in times of crisis. We either go one way and we kind of descend into that kind of base animalistic sort of survival, hedonism, violence instinct, and then the other group that sort of come towards this Mother Abigail, they sort of form a tight-knit community, and they sort of really overcome the obstacles and give off sort of the best version of humanity. So I think you're absolutely right in what you say, man. Like, humanity stands at probably one of the most pivotal crossroads that we've ever stood at as a race. Yeah.
So this is always something to remember, actually. It's hard for me as well, because time seems kind of hopeless sometimes, but it's you're here for a reason now. These are like, I don't know, these are paving the way for mankind, for whole humanity. So it's actually quite, I don't know, thankful for us to be alive in that certain time to create something.
And I imagine people. Sorry, go on.
No, I just wanted to say something, because since you mentioned dystopians, one thing I've found really interesting is that, where does this whole ideas, whatever story has been told, come from? It all comes from the same creative source, this infinite source of creativity that leads to masterpieces of music and art, and of novels, and it always has some sort of connection. And if you think about all the dystopias that are out there as like really I don't know, comparison to what's happening now, say like 1984, or Aldous Huxley, or V like Vendetta, for example. And yeah, it's crazy because it's out there for a reason, and especially if you realize that, for example, Alex Huxley and also Orwell were both part of some sort of insight and more elite viewpoint. They kind of saw some development already happening.
I mean, Huxley was, I mean, for anyone that's listening, Aldous Huxley is a British author. He wrote stuff like Brave New World, Eyeless in Gaza. Highly recommend it. But he was a member of the Tavistock Institute for Human Affairs. And so when he wrote Brave New World, the Tavistock Institute is also the headquarters of the British Psychological Association, and they essentially run the world in terms of human affairs, in terms of human interaction, in terms of advertising, in terms of government policy on social mobility, things like that. So when he wrote Brave New World, he, as you rightly say, he had the inside scoop, and maybe not even the inside scoop. He's the guy that was making the ice cream. This guy really, really knew. And when he predicted the final revolution, and he said, and the slaves will come, the world will come to a point where the slaves shall love their slavery through pharmacology and bread and games, which is essentially, give people food and give people entertainment, just like the Romans did, and the rest of their troubles will become sort of non-existent, or they won't notice them as much. So, yeah, Aldous Huxley is a pivotal figure, and I highly recommend everyone to get on your tablets or whatever and to check him out, because it's illuminating.
Definitely, yeah. Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to.
No, it's cool, and cool. It's always nice to share. I mean, probably there's people out there who don't know, and it's always good to have some actually point of view, because no matter how the detail works, they're all pointing in the same direction. As I said, like, it's the same source of energy, it's the same source of creativity, and yeah. But it actually, if you see where the goal is getting, you also can see how you can change it. And one major idea that you always have to remember is that you are co-creating this reality. So you even if it seems hopeless, even though this whole you can really feel that there's just this tension in the air in some sort of way.
Yeah. People are losing their tempers. You see people that having arguments over a space in the bus queue that, a year, 2 years ago, it would have just been a cordial conversation. But like you say, there is this tension in the air, and I think it's because people don't know and people are afraid.
And also, all this stuff is, it's some sort of, I don't know, it's some sort of it feels like imprisonment also, like you're locked down, you're locked away from your daily routines, you're just by yourself, without any sense of hope, without any sense of what's going on, what's going to happen a year from now or half a year from now. It's just like the next couple of weeks, let's see, and slight changes here and there, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less lockdown, and I don't know, it's just like it seems like an endless loop, and it creates such a, I don't know, it creates such a weird energy. It has a lot of potential, this energy, but it triggers a lot of lower instincts as well, with a lot of fear and anger and like survival instincts, and that.
But that's kind of, from my perspective, that's kind of what they want. It goes back to, I know we talked about it the other day when we were on the phone, but it goes back to shock theory and the Tavistock Institute. They realized, just after World War I, after studying so many cases of shell shock, that when a person is kept in a state of perpetual fear, then they lose the ability, they lose their connection with their higher rational mind, and they fall into this kind of herd mentality where, because they're so afraid, think of like a rabbit or a deer in headlights, they become so paralyzed by the oncoming fear. Sorry, my phone is just ringing. Yeah, they become so paralyzed by this fear. I think it's my grandmother, actually. She's got some dinner for me, but I'll bring her back. But yeah, this shock theory, it's being used on us all the time, and I don't want to be a propagator of doom and gloom, but you just, all you got to do is open a newspaper or turn on some form of centralized media, and it's just a constant barrage of fear and existential threats, and it's got people where that that they're unable to act. That what way do I move, or they can't even consider how to move. I mean, what's your thoughts? How do you think we can overcome this?
That's a good question, actually. I think the real word is liberation, actually. Like from everything there. I mean, it seems simple, but I mean, just imagine it's not only just news outlets or like the constant stream of advertisement and entertainment, but it's also the food. It's everything. It's like, just imagine what bad and toxic average food there is in the world, like full of chemicals, full of added stuff, genetically modified. And that's the stuff that we become. If that part of us is something that is not supposed to be there, of course our mind in some ways doesn't go through there, or doesn't read the information right, because there's some sort of weirdness going on, and mostly it's hard to digest as well. And the power of digestion is also really important thing, because I mean, it's not only there to digest the food and the physical stuff, but the same motion happens when within your mental levels. So that's when you have something to overcome, when you have some issue to overthink or whatever. It's the same process of digestion that happens simultaneously in your stomach. And if you stuff yourself with a lot of bullshit and your stomach is all the time working, then you can never overcome everything that you're kind of stuck with, the stuff that you put into your head.
Yeah, it's like if you're always full, you'll never be empty. I know it sounds a bit, but
it's something I'm trying to experiment more with now. Like I always had some phases with intermittent fasting, but now I try to eat as light as possible. Because you really know that your senses and also your whole body functions better when your stomach is empty. So of course that doesn't mean you shouldn't eat at all, but like keep as much space between the meals as possible. And
so I was going to say, do you advocate sort of fasting? Do you think? Because I know, like in certain religions, they have this kind of detoxification month, don't they? You've got like Ramadan, and Christians, we have what is it, Lent? Where we're supposed to give something up for 40 days. So do you think? Do you think
it's actually good, perfect that you mentioned it. Sorry, go on.
No, go on. Sorry.
No, I was just because perfect that you mentioned it, because right now that's the time for that. In the Christian, in the Catholic belief system, for fasting.
Right. You're right.
And that's why I was considering all that stuff. And it's not only about the food, it's your thoughts are your food as well. Everything that you consume is your food. So every sort of vibration that comes to you. So if you're exposed to computer screens a lot of times, and you're sitting down all the time, or like if you're just constantly in some sort of echo chamber, instead of just being more quiet, or being more within yourself, and creating the thoughts within yourself, because mostly you're just used to repeating something that you heard before. And it's hard, because it's
sorry, go on.
There's a lot of ways to actually start. That's what I'm saying, because that's one of the main problems with the mind, I guess, because we always see that, okay, there's a lot of shit going on, so what to do now? And since you see, like, either you see a main goal that it's like highly attainable, but you also see like the burden that leads to it. So you're more likely to say, oh, maybe I'm not going to do anything at all. But it starts with little things. Just be aware of what you're consuming, and maybe some days where you just say, once a week I try to not use the computer or whatever. That's what I'm trying actually now.
How's it going?
And I'm trying to grow more food by myself, and just getting involved in the whole process of life, and not just being relying on a system that gives you your fair share of the shit.
No, I mean, there's a lot of side trends we could go down there, with the food stuff like GMO and sort of aspartame, that artificial sweetener that's in everything. I mean, that's an awful neurotoxin, or cytotoxin rather. GMO. I know that a lot of seeds nowadays. I've actually done the same. I've invested in quite a few seeds, and a lot of the seeds now, like Monsanto produced seeds, they grow one season, and then they don't produce another generation of seeds. So you actually have to go back to Monsanto and purchase the seeds again. And now the seeds that grow the vegetable, and then the vegetable produces seeds, and you harvest them and you replant them, they've now got some special designation as heirloom seeds, like it's something special. But that's how nature intended it. And mankind, we seem to be thinking that we're sort of bigger than the natural structures. And I think that's the dangerous side. It's like control, isn't it? It's our lower vibration. It's the kind of devil energy in our stomach, where we seek to possess and control. And I think ultimately that there needs to be checks and balances against the elements of our race that seek to dominate Mother Nature instead of live in sort of perpetual balance with her. I don't know your thoughts on that.
No, definitely. That's the whole point. Because it's not about controlling the river, but actually just going with the flow of it. Yeah. I mean, there's certain laws in this whole part of creation, and they repeat on so many levels and variations, and you can learn to understand them and live in harmony with them because you're part of them. But once you try to, control something, you're already setting a boundary. You're already trying to separate yourself from something that you want to control without realizing that you're actually, the whole picture.
Yeah.
And that will never work. I mean, that's even when you can, most likely when you're getting more and more used to it. Of course, there's people that are so used to lying that it's hard to detect. But you can always kind of read another person the more you kind of learn about yourself, because you probably have the same experience, right? Like, because it's always a mirror. So the people are less likely to hide some emotions or some thoughts from you when they give you a look, And that's what's missing right now as well with the mask, right? We only see like the eyes, and they just kind of, of course there's a lot of power still in there, but the facial expression is such a reflection of your inner feelings, even though a lot of people trying to act cool and just try to not smile or do anything, but most of the times there's still some realness shining through their faces.
I think, why do you think it is that people are sort of, why do you think we have this mask? Psychologists have identified it as like the ego. Other traditions have similar viewpoints on that. We have this kind of outward persona that we give off. And do you think it's a result of our environment, or do you think it's sort of like some innate human response to kind of protect? I'm not sure. Do you think it's fear-based, the reason that we don't allow ourselves to express naturally, or?
Do you mean what do you mean, like in general, if it's society based, that we're not allowing ourselves to express ourselves freely?
Yeah, like you say, we can see a person by their eyes and by their micro expressions, but like you say, people nowadays, it's cool to be cool, or it's cool to be unbothered or uncaring. To be sort of not vacant, but just unmoved by the struggles of the world. And do you think that's a process of desensitization that has occurred from our environment, or do you think that's like a natural state of being for man? I'm just curious.
I think it's definitely something to do with the environment. I mean, of course, maybe in some sort of way, it's natural to go through certain states. So some of the states maybe that you are rejecting most of creation or whatever, but in the end, the natural way is to include it, I guess. So but I think it's a natural reaction still, because I mean, it's a coping mechanism, I would say, because I mean, if you're clearly cautiously looking at the world, there's a lot to be mad or sad or whatever about, and those are hard things to overcome, especially on the level of depth that whole drama goes. So I think it's like sort of a coping mechanism to detach yourself from it, because otherwise you get too much involved in a way that emotionally hurts.
Yeah.
And also there's a lot of numbing procedures that are helping that, like just imagine how many emotions you can feel when you watch, I don't know, 2 or 3 episodes of your favorite series, and it's a lot of drama and action going on, and probably it's not gonna be 3 episodes, but maybe 10 or whatever, and you're overstimulated, and then the next time you're walking past something quite ordinary but yet beautiful, you're maybe missing it because your receptors are fully overwhelmed from that night of binge watching.
That's a really good. I'd never thought of that actually. It's like we're getting our fix, our kind of emotional fix, or our adrenaline fix, or whatever, from these entertainment platforms that we have, like computer games, you know, films,
Yeah,
books, you
I
know,
mean,
pornography as well. You know, people,
oof, yeah,
they say that people's sex drives are down, or men aren't performing, or something. But how readily available, you know, any kind of fantasy or indulgence or sort of hedonistic thing that you may care to imagine, all a guy's got to do is just Google something or other and indulge himself, you know. And
yeah,
it goes to the pleasure principle. And I don't mean to go back to Tavistock, but it's quite a bit of a bugbear for me. And they another thing they realize is that, you know, if you punish somebody, you're likely to either get rid of or accentuate certain behavior patterns, but eventually they go back to their original state. But what they also realize is if you allow a rat to indulge its pleasure principle, you can actually reinforce behavior far better than you can through pain and like suffering. And I think that's what we're witnessing now, is the rise of this kind of hedonistic self-indulgence that stops us from pursuing anything higher. You know, all we need to do is, we want food, any kind of food, we go on our app and we get it delivered. You want sexual gratification, you go on Google or Tinder and you get your gratification. You want some sort of escapism, you turn to alcohol, you turn to drugs. It's all there. You know, every possible indulgence that you could want is there, freely and readily available.
And just imagine what that does with you as well, because the whole point of life is that most of the things you have to earn, and some of them take a lot of hard work or patience.
Yeah.
And when you get everything that you desire without any, not even the risk, you know, you can look at stuff. You don't have to go out there and find a woman. You can just look at some other dude, you know, plowing a woman or whatever, you know. And so there's just like such a distance to it that you getting rid of all the adventure that life is all about. And yet, and that's the crazy part, look at how famous some other worlds are, you know, like fantasy worlds, like Game of Thrones or whatever. Like every person, every human being has this sort of sense of adventure and wildness of life. And yet we are so numbed out by a mundane, repetitive life circle that we are kind of, you know, craving for these stuff, because I have the feeling it always comes back, you know, no matter how much you try to hide the natural way of the energy flows, it always comes. So, yeah.
Sorry, my phone was ringing and it upset my internet connection. Could you repeat that? Sorry, I didn't hear.
That's okay. Okay, that was quite intuitive. So let me think about. Oh yeah, I just said it. It always comes back. You know, you can never try to hide the natural way of being for a human being. You know, we are always striving for something, for example, and this striving to transform ourselves to a higher state of being is kind of taken care of in the career, self-realization, egoistic way of modern life right now, you know. Or for example, the pursuit of adventure is found in some fantasy worlds like Game of Thrones, or, you know,
like computer games. You've got
computer games, exactly, and
like Skyrim, or, you know, these kind of, I don't know what would you call it, like a role playing games where you can go and live out, you know, like you say, with men have this innate lust for adventure, you know, to go out and to explore and to kind of, you know, do quests, as it were, and stuff. And obviously I'm sure women have the same, but I'm not a woman, so I can't speak for them. But and I think you're right in what you say, that I'm not sure how nefarious it is. You know, do the people that run this planet know that we have those needs, and so they offer us these escapes as a channel to be able to kind of placate those drives? Or have these games and things just arisen as a natural response to these drives, where the modern world is more limiting in terms of the ability to, you know, go out and quest for gold, or to win the fair princess's hand, or, you know, whatever.
I think that's this. I was thinking a lot about what stories we are telling right now, because a lot of the mainstream movies are getting worse and worse, and are just so black and white, and you know, not taking itself too serious, yet being totally epic in a way. You know, a lot of action hero movies, a lot of overcoming darkness. I think there's always a natural reaction to something. You know, I mean, to every arising crisis, there's a new start. That's in the word crisis as well, in the original root of the old Greek word Christos. So, and you always see, like, that's what I mean with you can never hide anything. I think the more you try to repress something, no matter on what level of reality or level of, you know, what sphere you're talking about, it always bounces back. It's like a bouncing ball that you throw away, and the harder you throw it away, the more it bounces back and harder come bounce back to you.
Like
it's the same, like, just look at how rational and comparatively loveless life is, or has become at least. And the urge of, you know, I mean, not nowadays, and as in like the last 12 months, but, you know, the modern way of living. And the natural need of human connection and of human contact is reduced to mediocre outlets like, you know, prostitution, pornography, sex robots even, or escort people that just, or people online pretending to be your friends. You know, you can find rational outlets for everything that you actually need as a human being. And yet I think the main reason why a lot of anger, or I don't know what energy involves in people, is actually the loss of liberty, I think, you know, of their own you know what I mean?
Autonomy.
Like their self and autonomy. Thank you. Exactly.
I think you know that
because this is such an important part.
I was just going to say, you see the World Economic Forum, they had their predictions for what's going to be the world in 2030, and they were saying stuff like, you know, you'll have less privacy but more freedom. You won't own anything, but you'll be happy about it.
Crazy,
it is, and they seem to be pursuing this. You know, I've got nothing against the far left or the far right. You know, it's all ridiculous anyway. It's all divisive and coercive agendas. But this idea that, you know, we can't be offensive, that we can't, and I don't advocate, you know, being upsetting people. You know, why would you? Any rationally minded human being wouldn't want to go out there and upset someone. But if someone has an opinion, they should be able to voice this opinion. And I find this modern world, especially in Europe, is becoming more and more restrictive and more prescriptive about how you should be, what you should think, how you should think it. And I think we're going to start to see, probably in the next 10 years, manifestations of people, you know, rebelling against us. But the frustration is going to boil over. And I think you can only contain a human spirit for so long before it will just naturally seek its way out. Like you say, like a rubber ball, you know, you take a tennis ball and you compress it. Sooner or later, you know, it's going to pop back. And I wonder, how far can they go? You know, how far can they go in attempting to contain the human spirit?
I mean, you already see that it's not natural to you know, follow that line for us. Otherwise there wouldn't be such a tremendous amount of interaction with that in ourselves and our minds that is not natural, you know. This is the crazy part. I mean, it starts from the very beginning, that you get an identity by being born, and then you're just like part of a system that you know, values you and gratifies you when you repeat stuff, or when you just show up for something, and they tell you exactly what to do and never really how to think for yourself. And it's actually it's a long road, actually.
It is. I mean, I had a smoke the other day, actually, and while I was sort of in my trance state, I had this thought, and it was, we become more by becoming less. You know, we have to go through this kind of process of unlearning, of deconstructing, and it's like René Descartes was saying. You know, he when he got to a certain point in his life and he wanted to find sort of truth, he first went through all the things that he thought he knew and sort of unlearned them, and said to himself, you know, how many of my opinions are actually my own? How many of my perspectives are my own? How much of how I see this world actually belongs to me? And how much of it has been imposed upon me or learned or conditioned, etc., etc. And I think even though it's a paradox, you know, to become more by becoming less, I think that we all must go through this process of stripping away of, you know.
I have a nice picture for that, because I once was at a Muji gathering, and he said, when you write in your book of life, be sure to leave some pages empty so God can write in. You know, it's the same thing, you know, because that's actually one thing that seems logically a paradox, as you said, like, you know, becoming more by becoming less. But that's the whole thing, because what are you getting less of? You're getting less of your own idea of yourself, you know, your own thoughts, your own way that you were supposed to follow, like that linear line of it's just the same human being all along, and trapped in that body, functioning, the brain is dead and gone, bye. But yeah, it's definitely not like that.
So what steps can you take? Because I know you're quite active on your meditation, on your, you know, your diet and stuff. So if you're a person, let's just say, you know, Joe blogs or Sarah bloggins, and you're kind of aware, like, you know, that scene in the Matrix where Morpheus says to Neo, you know there's something wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it. What steps would you advise people to take, you know, from tomorrow morning, to kind of to find themselves, to be one within this experience, instead of sort of being I hope you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, I totally. I'm just actually thinking why you asked, because it's actually hard to point your finger on one thing, but maybe it's the whole perspective. Like I mean, you talked about my meditation practice. The whole point about it is actually not to say you sit silent for a few minutes or whatever time of the day, and that's gonna be nice for the rest of the day. But it also it teaches you something about something that you also said about Descartes, because he called his the works you were talking about, he called his meditations. And for a reason, because he was thinking about, okay, what am I actually as well? You know, I see this, I see my hand, I see everything around me, and it's moving constantly, and that's something to realize as well. You know, that's the stuff you observe. It's not you. In a way, it's you, but it's not you for now. And I mean, this whole thing is just a technique to get you self-involved in the actual moment, because we're always somewhere in the past or in the future, because our mind creates some picture or recreates a picture from the past, and so we're always stuck in this loop. And the problem is, once you wake up, you're always in the process of getting this whole stream of thoughts of the last couple of days, years, or whatever, surrounded by you, and it's hard to get started with this realization of what you are. But I think the main key is actually, for me, was I realized that during the lockdowns now is some sort of routine. It doesn't matter what it is, you know. I mean, there's a lot of techniques that help you to maintain this sort of level of you know, calmness or awareness in a way. But it's always about the routine as well. Like for me, it was a really nice thing now to say I will find myself in the morning waking up, still being in a dizzy mode of half sleep, half awake. I'm gonna do some sun salutations. It doesn't matter how many you do, and afterwards I meditate as long as I want to do it. Like, it's usually the same technique I'm using, and so it takes like about half an hour. But it doesn't matter about time, because that's also a construct that you're creating with your mind, because you're always craving for more. A lot of times I wasn't meditating because I thought like, oh no, I only sit for 10 minutes today because I'm so, you know, stressed or whatever, so I'm not going to do it at all. And that's also
counterintuitive thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. But it's the same technique that tries to control you. It's the mind that tries to limit you in a way, because, and the mind is limited itself, because it only has the experience that you had to this very moment, and nothing else. And everything that kind of helps you to transcend and to become more of you is outside your mind. And it's not an enemy, you know, it's part of you. It's sort of you, I don't know, a friend, or less, more or less, like a companion that is a useful tool.
There's that saying, isn't there, where it's your mind is a powerful servant but a poor master.
Yeah, exactly that.
I think, and talking about, you know, that clarity that you were talking about, you know, the consciousness, being in the present. I know that in psychological terms, they say that if you're in the past, you're depressed. If you're in the future, you're anxious. If you're in the present, you're sort of comfortable. And I've experienced moments in the present, you know, where I am fully conscious. I feel the wind, and I feel things around me. And I would say that getting to that point is the easy part. It's maintaining that point, maintaining your presence and consciousness in a world that is constantly trying to tell you or shape you, or, do you know what I mean, get into you, and kind of, in hermetics, it's the veil, isn't it? You know, we have this veil of illusion that sits over our eyes, or over our third eye. And do you have any tips for maintaining that consciousness?
It's seriously really hard. Even it's also hard for me. So yeah, the thing is that the thing that you, as I said, learn from meditation is the observational part is really helpful, because it helps you identify when some emotions or something come up, you know. It's not the point to see, like, for example, see fear coming up and say, oh no, I don't want fear, and just reject it, but rather to live the emotion, but then let it go as well, because it's, and I don't know, this is at least some helpful information when it comes to because what, you know, no matter what we do, it always comes back to the same thing. You're in your way of being, and then some thoughts, emotions, some whatever comes up, and you sort of react to it. But as you said earlier, you're not the slave. You're the master over the mind. So you can always take a moment and reconsider what you want to do, what you want to jump on or not. And it's, I mean, no, and I've maybe the main tip for me still would be easy, because it's I've been on that path maybe for 6 years, I guess, and it's nice, but it's also in a lot of ways hard, because there's a lot of things to uncover. So be easy and be nice to yourself, because it's not about, like, you know, doing whatever times of sun salutations, or being extra fit and extra clever and reading a lot of clever books about the topics, but rather just, you know, observing yourself, be invested in life. You have a unique point of view on life, and you have a purpose, and the only person that can tell you your purpose is you. And of course, there's outer people that can help you and inspire you or whatever. But in the end, it's all about just sitting down with yourself, no matter what way. If it's meditation, if it's a prayer, if it's drawing something, if it's a nice conversation, whatever, with yourself, whatever it is, you know, it just your whole, you know, creation that wants to create. So this is the main problem is always that the mind keeps us from creating, because it creates such a boundary of, oh, maybe should we do it or not, or, and in the end,
I think the ego mind, where, you know, where we develop an ego in childhood or late childhood, it serves a function to protect us, you know. And so if we come up with an idea for our own expansion, you know, and we're very positive about it, I think there is a functionality within most humans that comes up and says, like, "Ooh, you sure you can do that?" And I think we perceive it as a criticism or as an attack, but it's actually a very necessary function in humanity, the ego, to protect us from damage, from, you know, harm to ourselves, etc., etc. But I think it's learning again to, we're not the ego, we're not the brain, we are the pure consciousness that exists within us, you know, the all spark, the God spark, the however you want to say it. So when we get these thoughts that come at us, or when we get these, you know, our ego telling us this, or when we get negative emotions, one of the most useful things that I found is to just say the simple words, I'm not going to feed this. Because these things only exist if we attend to them, if we give them our attention. So like a thought comes in about something that could potentially go wrong, or what you should have done in the past. Acknowledge it, like you say, you know, you have to sit with it for a minute, acknowledge the existence of it, not reject it, because then you just suppress it and it manifests later on as a sort of a violent tendency or an anger or something. Sit with it, acknowledge it, feel it, you know, all of it, feel it, and then say, but I'm not going to feed this anymore. And like you say, just let it go. And that process of detaching from emotions and thoughts and ego really is about, where do you place your attention? And that's just one of my kind of survival tactics that's been serving me quite well, actually. And And I think when people realize that we aren't minds, I mean, one thing I say to my friends is, close your eyes and picture an apple. And they kind of close their eyes and they look at this apple. And I say, well, who's looking at the apple? And they say, well, I am. And I say, okay, so there's a difference between your mind and your consciousness, because you are observing your mind from the perspective of your consciousness. And when you see their face kind of, something clicks and they're like, yeah, okay. And I would advocate that to everyone. If you're sat there with an anxious thought or a depressed thought or something like that, just think to yourself, who's observing these thoughts? Oh, it's me. Wait, so these thoughts aren't me. Oh, wait, so that means they don't have power over me. Actually, I have the power to attend to them or not to attend to them. And I think that's one of the most powerful tools that we have in realizing.
What's that, brother? What's that, really? Yeah.
But,
yeah, it's always nice to remember that.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to, because our attention is always being demanded, always being demanded. The amount of quick story. I was in Nepal a couple of years ago, and I met this girl, Anshika Kuchwaha, her name was. She was an Indian trainee doctor, and she was developing a theory on Alzheimer's. And I remember we were sat having a coffee one day, and she said the amount of external signage that is there, the amount of things that are vying for our attention is so vast that she was postulating that our brains aren't relying on themselves anymore. They're relying on external signs and symbols and instructions. And so that part of our brain that would deal with kind of impetus and telling ourselves what to do is shutting down, because everywhere we look, I was in the train station in Bristol the other day, and every single square inch where I looked, I could see something trying to tell me something or demand something, or wanted my attention. And I actually shut my eyes for a moment, and I said to myself, like, no, I'm not taking all of this crap in. But it goes back to what. Sorry, I'll shut up in a sec. But it goes back to what we were saying about being present. There's so many things vying for our attention, and I think our attention, our conscious attention, is the most valuable asset that we have. And if we let it,
sorry,
sorry, I'm just going to say, if we let our attention be stolen from us, then we essentially lose ourselves.
Definitely. I just wanted to emphasize that it's a really good point, because in the end, this is like our most valuable, maybe our only currency, attention, awareness.
Yeah.
And this is what this whole being in the moment is all about as well, because once you put your whole self into the moment, it creates something more. That's why music and or any other form of art is like most of the artists talk about some sort of flow they go into. This is the creative field I was telling you about. It's like you're tuning into that, but it's really hard to get into that, because you're just so easily distracted nowadays. It's crazy how I think like our short-time memory is even worse than a goldfish right now, and I heard that already a few years ago. It's crazy. That's why we always, as you said, like on the hedonistic world point, because we are always seeing some sort of instant relief to our cravings. There's a thought coming up, okay, we can do it, or we have an idea, we can click on it. It's nothing to go on another level of really mind, because the point where you start using your mind and not the mind using you is when you reconsider the thought, and not like in loop, but like rather than in this observational thing that you and me were talking about. But it's hard, because nowadays everything is working against you in a way. So maybe also a nice way of reconnecting is definitely going easy, going simple. Really asking yourself, what do you need? What sort of relief you need? Do you really need to drink that much, or smoke that much, or do whatever? Always that's what it comes down to observation, as you said earlier, because you can always try to be in the moment. And once you maybe realize after the third beer, okay, this is not anything I want to do all the time or whatever. It doesn't need to be some sort of obvious harm, I say, or alternation of your consciousness. It can also be a bad habit of creating some sort of self-hate, or some, you observe some sort of thought that's negative, then you hate yourself for that negative thought or whatever. It's always creating loops.
I like what you're saying actually about being easy with yourself, because we are what we think we are, if that makes sense. You know, we become what we think we are, and our expectations and the law of attraction and things. You know, if we think that we are a useless, down and out, whatever, then invariably that's probably the reality that we're likely to create, because that's the projection that we're giving off to the universe. We're saying, hey, universe, you know, this is what I think I am, and the universe will say like, well, hey, if that's what you think you are, then you know, that's here it is. And you know, you've got books like this stuff.
Yeah.
I think they're a little bit. It's kind of been a bit commercialized and sort of made into a bit of a gimmick. But there's a lot of truth in it, man. You know, what you are is what you think you are is probably what you will be.
Yeah, definitely. That's the whole point of why the flow or the state of just being in the moment is for such a short time. Maybe during meditations or some sort of other way of altering your consciousness, or through art or anything. But in the end, it's just opening the door for a little, but not being there the whole time. But I think this is, for me, I had to think about it a lot, but I think this is maybe, it justifies this sort of realm of reality as well, because we kind of have to earn it, you know? Just imagine if every thought we're having would manifest. It would be crazy, because we are so, you know, we're so following our instincts and like, you know, primitive thinkings like survivals and sex.
Jeez, that would be a Salvador Dali picture I'd like to see, man. I
tell you. Let's see what the future brings.
Jesus, man.
No, but I think it's still, that's the whole thing, because earning comes by learning. You know, you earn the ability by learning how to cope with it. Because, you know, all the religions also kind of have, or not like all the religions, but it's always about believing, right? And it's the belief, it creates something. It's also some sort of awareness. This is the currency again, you know, like if you put the awareness to some sort of, I mean, it doesn't need to be a goal or anything, but it's some sort of aspect of life or whatever it is. It creates some energy there, you know, and it leads the way there. It's crazy. And it has its own will as well, you know, but it's, yeah.
And that's kind of like the immaterium. Like you've got the material and then you've got the immaterial. And I think both sides of nature have equal presence. You know, we probably spend as much time on the inside world as we do in the outside world. And knowing how to navigate that, I think, is quite a task. I know a few people that have spent too long down there and struggled to find their way back. And that's where you've got mythologies like, you know, the Minotaur or George slaying the dragon. There seems to be this prevailing myth, you know, of a hero figure going within some form of maze and slaying the beast. And I think that talks of, you know, man's need to go within to sort of do that shadow work, to confront those parts of ourselves. I think Jung calls it the what is it? The internal, not shadow? The internal, the shadow. Yeah, he calls it something. Incorporating the shadow, basically.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I think again with the distractions in the external world, we've kind of neglected the internal world, and you call it the spiritual realm, the immaterium, you know, chaos, whatever you want to call it, but I think there is definitely a prevailing need for mankind to reconnect with the inner, to kind of understand the outer.
Definitely. And this actually goes full circle to the topic we had earlier, because what stories are we telling nowadays? Because stories are in the end some sort of, that's how Bible or any, you know, surah or even some other verses from some other holy books work. It's always about telling or describing a picture to map ourselves towards something. You know, the stories are not about there's some bad guy, there's a good guy, good wins, yay, but rather like how to overcome that. And like that's literally like the slaying of a dragon is something of a battle of within, you know. And it's sad that we are just that it's such a you know, mirror of the state of mind that we are in right now, that we are telling so, I mean, there's still good stories out there, don't get me wrong, but like the mainstream narrative of storytelling is very predictable and dull and shallow.
Yeah, shallow is exactly the right word. Yeah, I would say. I mean, I'm not sure. Have you read much of Tolkien's work?
I only read actually Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and a little from the Silmarillions.
Nice, man. I'm a bit of a Tolkien freak, to be honest, man, and the amount of
fucking love it, yeah.
Oh, dude, the amount of wisdom that guy has encapsulated in his books. You know, like Middle Earth, I think is akin to like the ego, and then you have the orcs that are kind of man's lower, bestial, industrial, don't give a shit about nature, cut down the trees to make the kill, you know, to burn the fires to produce industry.
Yeah.
And then you've got man's higher side and the elves, you know, this kind of like living in harmony with nature, very, very kind of peaceful, you know, guiding, good, etc., etc. Then you've got the story of the dwarves diving too deep, finding the Arkenstone, you know, the story of greed. And then, you know, the thief has to go in and again, you know, to confront the dragon. It's these prevailing myths. And you're so right in what you say about how diluted our wisdom. And that's how wisdom used to be passed down and still is, you know, from generation to generation, was through parables and metaphors and stories. And we've kind of been detached from this, you know, but people can't generalize massively, but there seems to be a disconnect between the older generations and the younger generations, where the younger generations would take their advice from the older ones. Now they kind of take their advice from, I don't know, Vogue magazine or Men's Health or some influencer on YouTube that doesn't actually really have a fucking clue what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And I think it is true, man, that we kind of need to find our way back to this tradition of passing down ancestral wisdom through an oral tradition, or you know, through writing or something like this.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry. Go on. No, go on. Sorry, it's good.
I actually love the fact that you are a fan of Tolkien's work, because I really admire that as well, actually. And it's funny that you bring it up, because what's really interesting as well is I really admire your point of view about being like the lower and higher self of consciousness in a way. I never really associated it with that way, but it makes a lot of sense, actually. And it's funny to see that the whole idea, I mean, he started it with the language, right? With the and then he tried to make up a world, and the world he tried to make up because he had the thought of, was it always like that? Were we the only species in that capacity? Were there higher beings? Were there even gods here? And he was working with a lot of languages, but also studying, correct me if I'm wrong, some mythology as well. So he put that all into that work, and you can really see how that comes alive. And it's for me, it's actually it's a good comparison to see why, for example, even though it's only 20 years, I think, or something, but why, for example, the Lord of the Rings worked and the Hobbit, the movies at least, did not work at all, you know? Because the Lord of the Rings worked because they were telling such an amazing story with a lot of characters that had arcs, like character arcs, and a lot of, you know, individual motivation that created a whole world, which was kind of epic. And then they tried to rehash and reuse that idea and spit it out again, and yet it worked. You know, there were billions of people still watching it. So
but the Hobbit trilogy for me was an absolute travesty, man. It was a bastardization of it was disgusting.
Totally, man. I was so excited to go back there, but it was awful. I didn't want to dive too deep into that, but I just like that comparison because, and there was a lot of CGI as well, you know, and what didn't happen much in Lord of the Rings, only for Gollum, which was totally legit. And it was more about the people, more about, you know, it came more alive, and now it's just generated on computers and just put on nice screens, effect, 3D and whatever. And that's what I mean. Like you see how shallow it is, because from the outside it may be, I mean, The Hobbit didn't look nice, but other movies maybe look nice from the visual effects and settings, maybe the soundtrack even. But in the end, it's about the story, and if the story is shit, or even it doesn't have any value, you know, it's always about a message, or at least about, why are you telling this? You know, you just want to entertain me and distract me from reality for a bit of a while. Maybe movies like that are cool as well, don't get me wrong. But if
they have their place, for sure,
like they have their little place maybe, but there shouldn't be the main narrative, you know. It shouldn't be like about distracting yourself and going somewhere. It's rather like invest yourself. get curious, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And Lord of the Rings got me curious in a lot of ways, because it gets you that sense of wonder about like magical powers and beings and darkness overcoming, and you know, the power of will and friendship and whatnot, you know, like this whole, that's why all the fantasy stories that are well written work, actually, because they trigger something in us. They show us that there's more beneath, and we're just not admiring the characters themselves, but also seeing a reflection of ourselves within them.
Exactly that, man. I'm glad you said that. Actually, stories are a mirror, man, a mirror into the human condition, I think. And I say to my friends quite a lot that the most important thing on this planet and in this reality, it isn't money, it isn't you know, health or etc. It's the narrative. I mean, health is way up there, but the narrative that you accept in your mind or you create for yourself will dictate your health. So first and foremost is the narrative. And I think what we're witnessing at the moment is an attempt by certain groups within the power structure of the world that are attempting to dictate a single narrative to the entire planet and to centralize the power of the narrative. And that to me is the most terrifying thing, that, you know, everybody on this planet is going to be operating from the same narrative. We won't have that diversity that makes us so human. You know, when you have imagine a group of, you know, you've got a Chinese fella, a Middle Eastern fella, an African fella, a native Indian fella, you know, a Central Asian fella, a Caucasian fella, all sitting around exchanging stories. In that exchange of stories, there's so much wisdom, there's so much growth, there's so much organic, natural goodness that happens there. If they all operate from the same narrative, you know, they've all got Costas on the corner, they all believe that, you know, the world is going through this, that, and the other, then where's the growth? Where's the exchange? Where's the it's just cold and dead and clinical, and it's just terrifying.
Definitely.
It's terrifying.
Definitely. And it you know, the narrative, as you said, is also really controlled by what we say, you know, the way we express ourselves mostly are through words.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start using words as some sort of, or claiming them to be some sort of insult or something that you should not be saying, or even you should be saying or calling someone for now,
mm-hmm.
that's a whole new level. And also I really see that the funny thing is, we're coming back to ironically to the rubber ball coming back, because it's in a way, even though the people are numbed down and, you know, in a state of not giving a fuck too much anymore in order to react to this world, they're still sensible in a way. So they over-sensibilize over things because they want to get that injustice energy out, I think, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they are I don't know. I mean, it's of course nice to protect people from getting hurt, you know, but in some sort of way, there's never it's never the answer to avoid everything that is kind of I don't know, making you uncomfortable.
Yeah,
you know,
I think it breeds weakness. It's like when you have a small child, you know, and you protect that small child from making decisions or from, you know, dirt and bacteria and things. You actually, while you're trying to protect them, in actual fact, you're harming them, and you're stopping them from developing strength of character, the ability to make important decisions, the ability for them to produce their own natural immunity. And so this kind of, again, I agree with you, man. You know, I'm not saying that we should go out there and start cutting each other off and just being bastards, not at all. But we do need to be allowed to express, you know. And I think it's a human right, you know, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. It is definitely a fundamental human right. It's not a right that can be given or taken away. When we're born, we are all born naked and crying, and we're all going to die old, probably, you know, wet in the bed. Everything that happens in between is inconsequential. And I think what these people at the top have kind of forgotten is that they are exactly like us. They are 100% equal to us. We're not equal in our abilities, and I don't believe that everyone should be given the same opportunities. I think if you can't be a doctor from your own natural merit, then you shouldn't be pushed to be a doctor. Do you know? Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's kind of like they're just turning the world into one template. You know, this is what a good man should be, and this is what a good woman should be. Be this. If you're not this, you're socially deviant, and you're going to be faced with ostracification.
And also, there's a lot of opinions that are, you know, socially not only acceptable but like kind of required now.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
It's not like that we all together walk through this whole procedure, you know. And even if we did, there's still a total understandable variety of opinions on anything, and that's why this you know, this whole reality is nice, because we are, you know, separated souls kind of trying to realize that all our separate points of views they don't reject one another. We can still love and respect each other, and it's crazy. It's a crazy idea to think in order to harmonize us, to make us think and act the same. It's totally stupid, and it's totally unnatural as well. And yeah,
and I wonder how long I've got this feeling, and like I don't want to get into too much doom and gloom, so I'll kind of throw this out. Like, I've got this feeling that we're going through all of this, and I think I mentioned it to you last time we spoke on the phone, that all of this is happening, and we're kind of almost going to get to that point where we're all robots, and we're all kind of meshed up with machines, and we're all living in these simulated realities, having sex with, do you know what I mean? But then I think the universe is or the divine is going to sort of flip it in that last moment, or mankind will. And it's kind of like, it's just like a big lesson for humanity. And it might not be in our generation, and it might not be in the generation after. And if that's the case, I think it's the job of people like us just to keep that torch alive, you know, to pass it down through the next generation, so that at least we don't lose that. But I think there will come a point where the generations that come after us are going to turn around and look at this and be like, "Ooh, that was close, man," you know. But there's a lot of lessons I think humanity is
definitely and it's as we said earlier, we all have to earn it. So, and in the end, let's see if it's the cycle that we are gonna do that or not. It depends on us, but yet it's still, it's we don't see the future. We don't know, it hasn't happened yet, so let's see what the future brings for that.
I have faith, man. I have faith.
Me too, man. Me too.
Jeez. Well, should we leave it there for this session?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I think we could. It's a good flow that has ended.
Yeah, for sure. Right. I'll